So hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome. This is Romola D from Romola D Reports, and I'm here again with our weekend panels, which have become a thing weekend to weekend, and I'm so glad they've taken off as they have, all thanks to the vision of Michelle Young, who is co-hosting with me this evening. And Michelle, as people may know, is a great advocate for UK mothers and for mothers everywhere who have suffered wrongfully at the hands of the family courts, had their children taken from them, etc. She's also very much an advocate for speaking out about the crimes of the courts in the whole sphere and arena of financial crimes and wrongful bankruptcies. So her voice is very powerful, and I'm very glad and very grateful to be honored to be hosting these panels with you, Michelle. Thank you for your continued vision, that keeping these panels going. So
Thank you so much, Romola. It's an absolute honor to work with someone as wonderful as yourself. With,
oh,
with, so thank you.
You're very welcome, Michelle. Just to briefly talk about what we're going to be talking about today and who else is on the panel today, we're expecting one more person on this panel, and that's Sandy Adams. She's an expert on Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. She's been researching the subject for more than 10 years, I understand. She has a stunning website filled with information on the subject, and if she comes in here, is going to tell us about some of the darker aspects of Agenda 21. I mean, the whole thing is dark, as we know. But she's going to touch on some of the really dark aspects of Agenda 21 that everybody has to know about. Simone Marshall is a freedom fighter, a political activist, a great voice, as public speaker, someone who's unafraid to get in front of crowds and speak out and speak the truth, and who runs the Freedom Files with Robin Campbell. And welcome, Simone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I feel very honored and very privileged to be sitting here amongst such amazing warriors of truth and freedom. So thank you. Thank you for your invitation.
You're very welcome. I think this is sort of a truth journalism panel today. As people may know, we have two stalwarts of truth journalism in our midst. Here, Dean Henderson and Alex Thompson. Alex Thompson is a journalist with UK Column, a very well-known alternative media site in the UK. He's a researcher and commentator well known for his work in geopolitics. He is also a former GCHQ officer, a translator and interpreter with a background in rugby school in Cambridge. He's worked in a Christian mission in Russia, so he has an understanding of things from that part of the world. His specialties are geopolitics, comparative constitutionalism, the study of networked evil, and religious history. We're very honored to have you on the panel today, Alex.
Thank you, Romola. I've been watching your work for a while and delighted to see the weekend panels take off. And before that, to see how you have charted a steady course in a really very controversial part of alternative reporting, particularly when you get into the targeting of individuals, the electromagnetic means by which this may be done. This area spans several disciplines, and many of the characters who know the information are damaged characters, and you have been very gracious throughout and made sure that you have sourced your material correctly and made it your business not to fall out with anyone or have an ego battle, which is a rare skill in this regard. Delighted to make acquaintance for the first time with Dean and Simone this evening. I've already had the pleasure of meeting and talking to Michelle in various events, including the London events of a couple of years ago, the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, so out of which many good things have come. Basically, the people that have been in our orbit at UK Column, Michelle's orbit, and yours, Romola, and of course the people that Simone addresses in crowds as well. These are pools that are starting to find their way towards each other. Dean stateside again. In fact, I think he's very close geographically to one of the main American voices that I listen to on the big picture, which is Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. So much to be gained from pooling our information at this stage, cross-disciplinary.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Alex. I'm honored that you've been watching my shows, and certainly that whole subject that you mentioned of electromagnetic warfare and targeting, which is most definitely, a subject I've been following for a long time. I hope at some point we can cover that on this panel as well. That would be awesome, because it needs to be brought to the light of day, and many people don't know about it. In fact, actually, it's very much part of this spectrum of very dark satanic crime that we are going to be looking at today, and hopefully we'll bring that in as well. Let me introduce Dean Henderson. As many people may know, he is a rather well-known author. He's a researcher, an investigative journalist with 8 books to his name. He's covered the underground, ubiquitous power structures repressing humanity worldwide, and the latest of his books is Nephilim Crown, 5G Apocalypse, and Illuminati Agenda 21, the Luciferian Plan to Destroy Creation. And that, in fact, is sort of the subject of our discussion today. We hope to sort of really look into the heart of darkness, not just the current affairs that we're all faced with today, the current reality, which is these impossible, imposing lockdowns which are taking our basic human rights away from us, but who is behind it? Who is running this off on us? Who is attempting to repress and suppress us so extremely? And why are they doing it? And that really takes us to the really dark side of things. The Satanism behind it all, the blood sacrifices, the kind of really twisted ideologies and thinking behind some of the people who are doing this to us. So it's a very dark subject. I'm very grateful that all of us are here focused on speaking the truth as we see it and being unafraid to put the truth out there and helping to wake the populace up. So thank you again and welcome. And Michelle, feel free, to dive in over here. I know Simone has some great information for us. Dean has a lot to tell us. Alex has a lot to tell us. But perhaps you can guide us as to where we can begin.
Well, I'd like to start this evening, Romola, with the fact that I'm working with Anthony Stansfeld, who is the Fraud and Crime Commissioner in the UK. And we're working very closely. He has got 19 Archer Lever files full of forged court documents. My case is one of those where basically through the court system, whether it's the family courts, the insolvency courts, or the taking of our children, these court documents have no court seals. They're just a piece of paper, and they're unlawfully stealing from the people by using forged court documents. There are no court seals. These are unlawful instruments, and my case is one of those. So all my bankruptcy documents are forged, and I am just one of many.
And on the basis of these forged documents, real bankruptcies have been affected, right?
Well, what's a real bankruptcy? If the court documents are forged, there's no bankruptcy.
That's very good. So it should be invalidated. Is that something that you're saying we are heading toward being able to do? Is that what he's going to be able to do?
Well, when you've got 19 Archer Lever files, can you imagine how many cases across the country? So if those documents are all forged, they're not valid bankruptcies. So we're in the process of exposing that. Okay. The effect that has on a family's life, it destroys families. Can you imagine working all your life and everything is stolen? Theft by pen and paper on forged documents. And I have to say, the judges, who I call the executioners, a lot of these blue chip law firms, the accountancy firms, they're all heavily involved. And I want them to know that we are coming for them. They are not getting away with these crimes any longer. And, as we've had the previous panels, Romola, it's not just the bankruptcy frauds, it's also the child trafficking, where they are unlawfully taking our children through the court system. And I think maybe we should speak next to Alex Thompson, who has some insight into that. And then, we can just go from there, because we've got such a great panel. I don't know who to say, who should go next, because I think we have a real star panel this evening with just incredible people. But Alex, if you'd like to speak on that, on your knowledge with the Russian connections and the honey traps, maybe we should start from there.
Let's take this from the point of view of UK Column. How did UK Column become first a local news source for people in Plymouth, Devon, and then for the whole of Britain, and then for the world? It's because Brian Gerrish, our founding editor, when he came ashore from being a Royal Navy officer, found that he couldn't, nor could anyone else who was clean in business in Plymouth, set up businesses, particularly those that wished to impart skills and knowledge to the school leaving generation, without being interfered with and intimidated. Then he looked into how particularly European Union mediated money, but generally taxpayers' money from any source, was being defrauded and salted away. So he came up with the twin words fraud and corruption to describe what was happening in the city of Plymouth at the city council level, then in Devon, and then he last started looking into the theft of children, particularly at the Crown Courts across England and then further afield as well, and found that there was always the same fraternities involved. Now, at the same time as Brian was doing that in the decade of the 2000s, I was one of the Eastern Bloc specialists at one of Britain's intelligence agencies, GCHQ, which is the Signals or Electronic Intelligence Agency. The big theme of that decade is we started off trying to woo Russia. And then from mid-decade, really 2006, almost overnight, Putin was the great enemy, we were told. And I'm not here a fanboy for Putin. We'll get into that perhaps a bit later. I think none of us would agree that Putin is an angel of light, quite the opposite. But what is often called UK PLC, so the British establishment doing business through various fronts, became very annoyed very quickly with Putin, because all the oil and gas concessions, the colonial era kind of way we were going to treat Russia, was overturned overnight. The intelligence control and fraternities that had existed since the 1990s, both sides of the fall of the Iron Curtain in time actually, were suddenly shattered. And it took a long while to work out what was going on. I don't want to get into the weeds of individual names and cases. We're talking big picture here. The individual cases are on ukcolumn.org and many other websites of reputation. The basic pattern is that a gentleman's agreement was made within secret societies, and let us name it, within Satanist organizations and people of that religious persuasion and worldview, starting in the city of London and Manhattan, which were unchallenged in controlling the world's currency flows. And the silent partner in all that, of course, is Israel in its guise as the Zionist state, not as the Israeli people, or much less the Jewish people, but a particular form of political Zionism it made no bones about that from the embers of the Second World War onwards, what kind of state it was going to be. It was going to pilfer the world's intellectual property and bankrupt people, together with a great deal of help, as our Scottish correspondent David Scott also often says, let's not be anti-Semitic because we Scots yield to no one in plundering and defrauding. We've been at it as long as the Jews, as it were. So that this comes together with the former Soviet Union when it was still the Soviet Union. A book which people should read on this is a gentleman who's come out of Soviet military intelligence called Daniel Estulin, Estulin. His book is short but very hard to swallow because of the depth of the claims. But in that he covers, for example, the MI6 whistleblower Richard Tomlinson's claim that Putin personally was turned by a man who later became the head of MI6, Sir John Scarlett, when both the KGB and MI6 were being trained at a facility in Jerusalem under church cover, actually. And why is the spiritual angle significant? Because the men involved in the secret societies in both West and East had a secret loyalty to each other. The formal appearance would be Royal Arch Purple Freemasonry, but I'm not particularly singling out Freemasonry as a model here. It's simply one of the fronts. But the agreement was we have secret loyalties to assist each other, to plunder goods, to bankrupt companies, and to put the proceeds into controlled companies. And that is the basis, I'm afraid in hindsight, I've decided, of Western intelligence and Russian intelligence as well. It is there, okay, there's a lot of humdrum, necessary, thankless tasks involved, keeping the nation safe from genuine terrorists and infiltrators and espionage. Of course there is. But the kind of people who benefit from intelligence, the people at the top of the legal fraternity in a country like the United Kingdom, are very heavily weighted towards being dark operators who, if they don't take bribes personally, will at least stand by idly and look the other way while money is siphoned out of companies. If this is done at international scale, it's called a geopolitical scandal and leads to a split such as the one we saw around 2006 between the Cozy Club in Russia and the Cozy Club in Britain. If it goes down to local level, it's a tragedy such as happened to Michelle. People who've spoken to UK Column have described how this happens without the banks and legal fraternity necessarily being involved. There are simply pockets of wealth in the nicer parts of Britain and the United States, for example, and other countries I know as well, Australia, where it's known to be a wealthy area. A satanic cult will descend on an area, send someone who is sexually attractive to the target, in many cases cause that person to marry the target, flip their personality, use demonic tricks, to put the frightness on people, to suck the wealth out, and then attempts to destroy the life. And there is such a thing, including in Britain and most US states, as an off-the-book system where people can be sent and kept in prison without the knowledge of the court system or the above-board penitentiary system as part of the punishment or keeping them away from the public. People then have their minds sucked out so they don't remember what goes on. I know that I would sound crazy even to my earlier self saying these things, but we have enough attestations that it works. And if it happens at a local level, you would think of it by different names than if it happens at national or international level. The word that I've started using in talks such as I give to the Alternative View event from time to time, many of which are online now, is that the people involved are operating in fiefdoms. They do believe that Satan runs the world and that they have been given license and a duty to plunder the wealth and the goods and the life and the children and the joy of those who are not in their club and store it up for their master Satan.
It's actually interesting, Alex, you've said this. I'm not going to go into too much detail on my case, but my ex-husband, before he was murdered, his girlfriend, and she was his previous girlfriend, because he decided he wasn't going to marry her. Her previous boyfriend was actually Matthew Mellon from the banking family. He was also found suspiciously murdered or dead, whatever way you want to put it, but he was found and his assets were also stolen. So I find it, why haven't the police investigated Noelle Reno, Scott's previous girlfriend, knowing that the former billionaire was also found dead and his assets were stolen? Exactly the same scenario with my ex-husband. Why has she never, ever been investigated by the British police? And she was actually allowed to go back into that apartment and she was shredding documents after and she was the last person to see him alive.
It's very similar to what happened to certain men in Russia who were compromised and useful to you can call it British intelligence, but it's not the intelligence network, it's a few gentlemen within it, who were useful to that clique. Mikhail Khodorkovsky and his sidekick, who we're told a great cock and bull story about now, who died supposedly after police beatings in custody. It's very comparable. It's just that people look at it differently. They perceive of it differently if it involves different countries or different walks of life. But the model is always, if you are a state body, even in a country that operates under common law like Britain or the United States, where the fiction is the police are just us in uniform, they're civilians doing the civic duty of all of us and have the same law to stand on as anyone else. The reality is, if you're a good constable or officer, you will be thwarted. If you're a good lawyer, either defense or prosecution, you will be thwarted by people higher up, because the satanic forces that we're talking about here are utterly hierarchical and work on, we're increasingly realizing, if you look at a very recent talk by David Scott called Fear Not on ukcolumn.org at the top of the homepage at the moment, we're realizing that fear and also pride and arrogance and all these other virtues, or vices of thinking I don't need any correction from outside, these are used by the dark forces that we're talking about, and they are an absence of truth and an absence of love and an absence of conviction to do the right thing. So the more a hierarchy becomes fear-based or prideful, the less you will see people doing the right thing, because they know in advance that it will be stymied by higher-ups. So that explains why egregious abuses are allowed, in your case, Michelle, and in many other cases at very many different scales of the system, if we like, knowing perfectly well that rank criminality has gone on, but making every effort not to investigate it.
And I think that, you know, the more money involved, the bigger the target you are, because, you know, it's a major theft, isn't it? But anyway, I think, you know, on that subject, Alex, I think we should maybe hear from Dean and Simone, and then we can all interact with the truth this evening. So Dean, would you like to comment with your expertise?
Sure. Yeah, that Alex is a really interesting microcosm of some macrocosm. These people are vampires. They're parasites. They've always been this way. They're not people. I shouldn't say people. They're Nephilim. They don't. To me, you know, the Crown Corporation that is the head of the snake on this earth is synonymous with aliens, Anunnaki, and AI, and they just parasite people. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. They want us to be batteries for their satanic system, and they always knock out the competition. You know, so like right now, the United States is really what could stand in the way of this New World Order. So we see the United States being attacked most with the COVID and in the riots and everything, and the rigged election that we just had, and which was the Crown again intervening with Dominion, software company which counted the votes that wanted to count them. Lord Malik Brown is on the board of that, has the most shares in that. He's a House of Lords member, and I'm sure he's a pedophile and Satanist. I'm sure he is. So sue me. You know, it's like these people are just, they're not people, they're just disgusting. And the whole idea of archy, you know, whether it's hierarchy or patriarchy or for that matter, matriarchy, the idea of arching over another is just retarded. It's like, it's not a human tendency. You know, we tend towards sharing and loving and being equal and treating everyone with equal respect. And we don't care. We never cared about man, woman, brown, black, white. We never cared about any of that. It's just they brought all that into the discussion to divide us and keep us distracted from going after the parasites. And that's the Crown Corporation, City of London. And the Freemason religion is a Satanist religion. So you find that the Fraternal Order of Police, for example, yeah, that's what it is. It's part of the Brotherhood. It's part of the Dark Brotherhood. And so there might be a good cop once in a while, but they'll fire him or they'll demote him or they'll take care of him and get him out of the way, because the police are there to protect the hierarchy. They're there to protect the parasites. Mm-hmm. You look at the protocols of the Elders of Zion, and yeah, you can say, oh, that was a forgery or whatever. Yeah, I've been through that enough to just, I don't even take that seriously anymore. It was not a forgery. There's 3 different surfacing incidents of this document. It's not a forgery. And they talk about how the police would be, you know, they would create the police to do just this. And then they, you know, to keep the people under their thumb, and that they were the key. The police were the key. The police and the military are the key to keep in their power, you know. And then they talk about talking to us like 6th graders and dumbing us down. They talk about everything they're going to do to us, and they've done it and they're doing it. But the whole thing is the Crown Corporation, which you can trace back to Samaria, the Anunnaki intervention 8,000 years ago. It goes back further, but that's about where, you know, the actual written trail ends, you know, that I know of. I think because if the Alexandria Library hadn't been burned down, then there'd be more. But they go all the way back there. They were the pharaohs. They were the Babylonians. They were the Holy Roman Emperors. They still are. They're now just lodged in the City of London. The Roman Empire never died. You know, the Egyptian Pharaonic Empire never died. It just relocated. And the British Empire certainly has not died. And now it's just called the Commonwealth. And they use the Commonwealth to do just that, to strip the assets. I mean, it's a Luciferian inversion of language. There's nothing Commonwealth about it. It's more like, we're going to hoard your wealth. You know, we're gonna come and take your wealth if you're in the Commonwealth. You're gonna be treated like a third world country. Which, look at Nigeria. a lot of commonwealth being shared in Nigeria, I guess. I mean, yeah, and then they'll put a few families in power in those countries that are in on the scheme, that are also satanic families. You know, you have, it's a global oligarchy of Nephilim crown bloodlines. So like in India, you got the Tata and the Birla family. And in Venezuela, you got the Cisneros family. And in Bangladesh, you got the Ashad family. And you got families everywhere that help these people, and they all put their money into the city of London. They all send it away from their countries. They rob it from their countries, rob from development, deindustrialization. That's what they're all about. They want to deindustrialize everyone, especially those competitors like the United States. And they did the same thing to Germany with the hyperinflation before Hitler. You know, Germany was becoming a competitor to the crown, to the UK, in terms of they were making, you know, they're engineering some really good stuff. And so what did the United Kingdom do? The United Kingdom took down Germany a notch with that hyperinflation, and then with Hitler. And they're still just recovering as we speak. But so it's and that's what they do. They buy people off, whether it's a honey trap, whether it's money, whether it's status or position, or this is how the Nephilim satanic network works. Is all about buying people off. So if you can buy the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania off, Miss Brockfar, who has connections with Evelyn Rothschild, we're finding out, then you can buy an election in Pennsylvania. You know, if you can buy the police commissioner off in Detroit, then he'll turn the other way when, you know, all these 130,000 ballots come in at 3 a.m, and every single one of them is for Joe Biden. And there's a Biden-Harris van out there where they're filling them out in the van. I mean, you can, as long as you can just buy anybody off. And so what you want to do with this hierarchy system, with this satanic system of hierarchy, is you promote the people who are most corruptible. So you end up with a system where the most crooked, corrupt people with the lowest moral integrity, with the lowest character, actually rise to the top in this current world. And this is why you have the psychotic people telling us, like Gates and Fauci, and these psychotic people now are telling us what's up, you know, and they're actually the dumbest people. They're the dumbest people too. They're really dumb. Because there's a level that don't even know what's going on. They just got bought off, and their stock price went up, and they don't care. And then they somehow they rationalize that they're doing good for the world, because they've internalized this inverted morality of the Freemasons and the Illuminati, and the Freemasons are the Christian component. The Muslim Brotherhood is the Muslim component. The Kabbalists are the Jewish component of this secret satanic network. And it all came out of the mystery schools in Egypt, with you know, where they basically started to suppress the knowledge that humans had of themselves, like that we could heal ourselves, that we could go place to place, that we could talk to our ancestors and get help from them, which is all true. And they suppressed that from us, and they said, we're going to take over this now. We're going to, you know, basically hide these secrets from the human kind and lord over them, and we have the right to tell them and steer them, and you know, and some of them really think they're doing us a great favor, but it's just absurd. And it's this all based on bloodlines, and it's all based on connections to this Nephilim crown that goes way back. So it's totally crooked, it's totally corrupt, and it's time we tell the people the whole story and exactly where it's coming from. And right now, their lair is in that little city of London over there that you guys have to see every day. And you can see how ridiculous and absurd it is with their funny little hats, and they're hiding behind something. They, you know, whenever you have to come off as like you're so, but that's part of their shtick, you know, like they're so barbaric. They're so barbaric that they have to then hide behind this veneer of high society, and we're so genteel, and we're so gentle, and so they have, that's part of the inversion again of reality. And they taught the Indians how to scalp here in America. They paid for scalps from other tribes because that was how they paid their mercenaries, like Daniel Boone and, you know, Kit Carson, and all these people we were taught were so great, and they were these great explorers, and they were just Indian killers. And they had the Wetiko disease from the European disease that was given all to Europeans by the crown. through that middle age, dark age period where, you know, we were taught to just basically submit to these fiefdoms. That's what they are. They moved around Europe and they had different countries and different areas. And the Habsburgs had this, and the Anjous had that, and the Plantagenets had that, and the Merovingians had this part, and the Bourbons had that part. And they just carved it up in this fascist order. Fascism is the bundling of the bloodlines. And and we're still to this day operating under a fascist, openly fascist system in the world, where there's really no world, there's no governments really. They're just subsidiaries of the fascist global oligarchy, the bloodline. And in fact, it's all sort of merged into one bloodline now because they interbreed, and that's what makes them stupid. That's why they're not very smart. That's why we can easily win this situation we're in. All it takes is to get people up off their knees and say, you know, we're not going to bow down to you anymore. We're not going to submit to you. We're not going to obey you. We're not going to comply with you. We're going to be free humans, just like we were born. We were born perfect, came out of our mama's perfect. And they spend their whole lives trashing us and telling us how bad we are. And again, that's overcompensation for how bad they are. Because and every ideology they come up with, like capitalism, was invented by Adam Smith, East India Company. He worked for him. They had to justify their genocide and their rape and their pillaging, just like you're talking about here with the pillaging of people's wealth. Well, who would you think the pirates were? You know, who do you think that? I mean, they're pirates. This is what they've always done. The Templars, when they first got ships, they went all around the world. They looted indigenous cultures. They stole all their relics, all their gold, everything. And they brought it back to the Holy Roman Empire. And that's the wealth that was established on. That's the wealth Europe was established on. And then America, and then Australia. And what took, you know, so it's all about looting. It's all about crime. It's all about murder. This is the mafia. There's no difference between the Crown Corporation and the mafia. Okay. That's one thing. You know, they make these little barriers so we can't connect dots. It just boom, blah, you know, it's like, that's the same thing. The mafia and the Crown Corporation are the same thing. And so that's one thing. But they're crooks. They operate openly, only because we comply, only because we submit to them. The only reason they ever allowed nation states to exist is so A, they can tax the people, and that taxes go to the Crown, again, a form of looting and vampirism. And B, so they can put one nation against the other, and they can make money selling arms, selling oil, you know, moving drugs through those borders, you know, whatever happens in a war, which is nothing good about it. Human trafficking, blood trafficking, organ trafficking, you know, and right now they're infiltrated everywhere through these companies that contract. And the contractors are, for example, in the US, we have Serco, which contracts to run our patent office, which contracts to do security on our military, every branch of it, including the NSA, FBI, and CIA. So you have the Crown sitting there in the catbird seat, knowing where the U.S. Navy ships are going that day, knowing where our troop movements are, knowing the records of all our veterans, because they also run the veterans records. They run the medical records, Serco does. They run the driver's license office records. They have all the records. That is the epitome of big data, Serco. And Serco is a Crown agent corporation where the Queen has a golden share. And another one, Connecticut, I found out recently, is very well could be QAnon. And this is, again, is a Crown agent controlled, Crown agent corporation that has, you know, fooled a bunch of people. And these contractors are increasingly being, through privatization, through the privatization of the planet. Because the one thing they really got in most people's heads now is that, you know, government is bad. Should get rid of all government. And this started with Reagan over here and Thatcher over there. And when we went along with that, and most people, almost all people have, everybody thinks government's bad now. But Thomas Jefferson said government is the buffer between the oligarchy and the people, the oligarchy and the peasants. And he's right. And without government, we have what? We have a global fascist bloodline network ruling us through the WHO, through the WTO, through supranational entities controlled by the Crown. And then we have contractors coming into all our governments and robbing the wealth of our nation, just and then monitoring us and enslaving us as well with everything that's coming. Yeah, I think this thing is global. This looting, this vampirism is global, and we have to stop it. And only it's simple. You just get people up off their knees, and it stops overnight. But right now they're scared, and Alex, you're right. They use fear. Fear is the main weapon, and we just have to not be scared. It's pretty simple. Just don't be scared. There's nothing to be scared of. We have divine source behind us. We have creator behind us. We go forward on the offensive, and we keep exposing these people, and they know that we're doing it, and they're scared shitless right now. Honestly, they know that the time is coming, and they know, and they see all the stuff we're doing to expose them, and they are very nervous right now. And I think that's precisely why they're springing the COVID, what I call quantum 19, because it's a computer virus generated on a computer, and that's a mind virus, a Wetiko fear virus, and it has nothing to do with genetics or biology or germs or anything like that. That's all their stuff. But they're using fear to really do some crazy stuff. And you can feel that it's an off-planet thing. You can feel that this is not from here. Like what's going on right now with people, it's like panic and you get paid. Panic about COVID and you get paid. And the people like to panic. I mean, through Facebook, through all the social media, we've been turned into these emotive creatures that love drama. And it's almost like, what would people do if they didn't have the drama of COVID-19 every day? They love it. So it's weird. It's like it's a parasite force that you can feel like taking over people right now. And it's going to be pretty soon 2 different species. Like there's going to be the people with the fear, and they're not even human anymore. And there's going to be the people without the fear, and they're the humans. And we'll have to see how that checks out. But there's no middle ground anymore. You have to pick a side here. That's always the way it's been.
It's not really difficult either, is it, Dean? As they are few and we are many. Could I ask you a question? With your incredible skill set, with all the company house records that you've gone through over the last 35 years, with the COVID-19 and also the 5G, is it the Crown Corporation behind these 2 depopulation tools as well, with the vaccine and the 5G?
Yes. So the company that Silicon Valley is controlled by the Crown, again, through these hedge funds, and SoftBank is a big part of this. They're based in Japan, and they're controlled by the Yamamoto Nephilim bloodline family, which are the emperors of Japan, along with the House of Saud has a big interest in this. But the entire Crown, SoftBank is their tool, and they fund almost every Silicon Valley startup through SoftBank. And it's funny how they call it SoftBank and Microsoft. Again, they're inverting the language, these brutal, brutish corporations, and then they want to tell us how like they're fuzzy and they're soft, and they're So SoftBank's a big one. Serco runs a patent office, and so they funnel with help from IBM Eclipse Foundation, which is the old Nazi supporting company. And Hillary Clinton's Rose law firm was involved. There's other law firms involved where they're patent law firms. They deal with patent law, but those patent law offices are basically not there to help the little inventor. They're there to suck up the inventions. And this is the other hallmark of the British Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. They constantly are sucking the innovation out of all parts of the world. So if they see a bright mind or an invention, they will just go and just steal it immediately. So they funneled all this first through the Stanford Research Institute, which is where Google was founded, with funding from DARPA. And then it moved up to Silicon Valley. So, for example, you have Crown Castle, which has built almost all the cell towers in England and here. It's called Akiba now, and it's based on Fleet Street in the city of London, and it's a Crown agent corporation. You have General Electric, which is the company that has all the smart meters. General Electric came out of RCA along with Serco. Serco also came out of RCA. RCA invented sonar and radar, probably the cause of the 1918 Spanish flu. And these are all Crown agent corporations. RCA Corporation was heavily involved with the Kennedy assassination. So General Electric has all the smart meters, and that's what caused a lot of the fires in California. That just where the house was just burned out from the inside out, and the trees are outside were all left standing. That's what happened there. But it's also the way they're going to monitor us. It's the way everybody's house will be monitored with the 5G when that rolls out. So then you have Lockheed Martin, which nowadays is indistinguishable from British Aerospace. Because they've both bought each other's subsidiaries and shares. And in any case, they were always both Crown agent corporations, and they're the ones building the space fence, and they're the ones involved with chemtrails, which is an attempt to make us into antennas with the strontium, aluminum, barium. If you spell it, it's ball, B-A-L-L. If you start with barium, aluminum, and it's like the cult of Baal, there it is. But so there's a couple more companies that are Crown agent corporations. As far as the actual COVID outbreak, it was Wellcome Trust, which is a Crown charitable trust, along with Pirbright Institute. And Pirbright Institute is another Crown charitable trust, and they're the ones that got the lab going in Wuhan, where this was probably tweaked. And they were there when the military games happened in Wuhan, when this COVID supposedly, there was an outbreak, and they turned on the 5G when that happened. And then in every city after that, there was 5G plus heavy pollution, because all that stuff weighs on our immune system. Already, the glyphosates, the fluorides, all the dirty air, the dirty water, the Lombard region of Italy where it broke out, just a really polluted area. But plus they were putting 5G out, and they were rolling out 5G at the very, very same time, of course, that this happened. So those two things, they both were, Pirbright and Wellcome were both involved in Event 201 as well. Now, everybody mentions Gates, but for some reason, nobody wants to talk about the Pirbright or the Wellcome Trust. The Wellcome Trust, came from Glaxo Burroughs Wellcome, which is now GlaxoSmithKline, GSK. So GSK is another Crown agent corporation that's going to cash in on these vaccinations. And they're also the ones that mostly work with Gates. That's mostly who Gates works with in Africa, India, to sterilize women with these malaria vaccinations in Africa, and also to create an outbreak of polio in India where polio never existed until Gates showed up. So GSK is a Crown pharmaceutical company. The other Crown pharmaceutical company is AstraZeneca, and British Telecom is another one, which of course, and Vodafone, which is at the forefront of a lot of the technology. They're the ones that have the soul catcher technology, they called it even. So you have this, and now in the recent election, again, we have this Dominion software. Dominion is a Crown agent registered corporation in Canada, which is, under the Queen, part of the Commonwealth, and their subsidiary in Denver is the one that probably rigged this election. So, I mean, literally, if you just start looking at the Crown agent corporations, and it's easy to do. They have a website, they have branches in every country. The Aga Khan Foundation is another key part of this, and that's the Crown foundation. The Khan family is a Nephilim bloodline family that controls India, Pakistan, that region, Afghanistan, South Asia, really. Genghis Khan, it's Genghis Khan's bloodline, okay? And Aga Khan Foundation funds all the Muslim terrorism. So with backing from the Muslim Brotherhood, which is lodged in the House of Saud at the headquarters of Aramco, the biggest oil company in the world, which is still really controlled by, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, Exxon, and Chevron, the four horsemen of oil. That's who controls Aramco. Even though the Saudis have officially nationalized it, they get all the service contracts, the marketing contracts, all the downstream cheap petroleum, and make their chemicals and their plastics and everything else they make in Saudi Arabia, which is pretty much a lot of stuff. And so Aga Khan Foundation, founded by Aga Khan, friend of the Rothschilds. I think there's been a lot of intermarriage with the Khan family, with a bunch of British white glove aristocrats. And current president of Pakistan, prime minister of Pakistan, is a Khan. And of course, then you have the fact that every prime minister of India has descended from the Khan bloodline, just like every president of the United States has descended from the Plantagenet bloodline. And so the Aga Khan Foundation is Islamic terrorism. In other words, British intelligence manufactures Islamic terror, whether it's ISIS, whether it's Al Qaeda, whether it's Wahhabism, which British intelligence sort of brought into Saudi Arabia, whether it's Mujahideen, El Shabaab, whatever it is. That's all British. That's all Crown intel. It's all Crown operation. And then you have a company called Securicom, which had the security contracts on the World Trade Center, which Marvin Bush was the CEO. That's George Bush's brother. And they shut down different floors of those trade centers 6 weeks prior to the 9/11, and they rigged them up with thermite, explosives. Those buildings came down in a controlled demolition, obviously. And so that also, Securicom, now SecuriSec, they changed their names a lot to hide, is also a Crown agent corporation. You have Brinco, which was the head of the Kennedy assassination out of Jamaica. And Brinco ran David Sarnoff at RCA, and they ran Division 5 at the FBI, Guy Bannister, and they ran the CIA component through Howard Hunt, and they ran the Israeli component largely through RCA, actually, because Sarnoff is a big Zionist. And that's who killed Kennedy. And Sir William Stephenson, British for the MI6, and he's James Bond. He's the guy that every time you watch a James Bond movie, you're glorifying I guess giving acquiescence to the guy that assassinated the greatest United States, but maybe the world ever had. So this is deep. This is there. It's just people just have to open their eyes and look at it. And a lot of them won't, because like their great grandpa was maybe beheaded by the Habsburgs, way back. And there's intergenerational like PTSD, like, where people are traumatized and they've been so conditioned not to look at the Crown Stock Institute, Chatham House, Royal Institute of International Affairs, Royal Geographic Society, Royal Physics Society, Royal Astronomy Society, telling us about Big Bang Theory, tell us about evolutionary theory, tell us about germ theory, tell us about particle physics theory, all theories, and lying to us about the nature of reality. And then to top it off, you have this sort of Anglophile push where we're supposed to think that the British are so much smaller than us, And so every History Channel documentary in the United States now, or any documentary, has a British narrator. And it's really weird. So America has become this Anglophile nation.
We have a love affair
the crown
with England.
We have all of affair. And then why do you suppose that is? And it's the same reason you're supposed to go to Tuscany to vacation. And you're supposed to look up to Italians, and they're so sophisticated, and their wine's the best in the world. No, it's not. It's shit. Drink some California wine. It's way better. But the thing is, that's the Holy Roman Empire. That's the Holy Roman Empire. So we have to bow down to the Italians and bow down to the Brits. And it's nothing against the people. The people are wonderful, but it's just they have to keep their crown safe, and those are two really important locations for this hidden Nephilim bloodline: Italy and the UK. And by the way, no coincidence that their bank, the Bank of International Settlements, is halfway between Rome and London. Very convenient. And that is run by the Hohenzollern family, because each of the families has a task. Like the Queen Elizabeth, one of her tasks, the Guelph, she's a Guelph, she's a Venetian Guelph, and one of her tasks is to run HARP, which is the mind control aspect of this whole thing.
That is huge.
But
You said that on my interview as well, Dean, and that is huge. People don't know that Queen Elizabeth is connected to the Guelphs
look
and HARP.
Look at the coat of arms. There's a harp on the Windsor coat of arms. Check it out.
Wow. Okay, I will. Absolutely. Maybe I'll bring it up. But that is,
Yeah,
gosh,
you can find
that
it.
is That's really an incredible insight into who is running the world, into the corporations that are running the world, and who are literally, holding us all down, keeping us all down. And you're talking literally about the focus in England and Italy, and the sort of the culture, as the aristocratic culture that we're all being primed to look up to as brilliant. That's the facade, though. That's the lovely facade, the elegant facade, right? That we are all being
Right.
forced to be duped by, because underneath the facade is what you both talked about, what both you and Alex talked about. There's these fiefdoms, this Satanism, this very dark demonic practice. And maybe this is the point at which we can bring in what Simone wants to share with everybody, which has been going the rounds on the internet a little bit, but which is indeed very, very dark information. But perhaps that's what we all need, Dean. We need a kind of a kick, a real sort of jump start here to understand that we're dealing with literally extreme evil, and it's evil directed against humanity, against people, against children, against babies. And we need to start speaking out for our own, for our own families, our own children and babies. So Simone, perhaps I don't know how exactly you wish to share this information, but feel free to jump into it at any point.
Oh, thank you, Romola. Yeah, Dean touched on so many points to this puzzle. There's so many pieces to it, but fantastically bringing it together in an overview. You happen to mention many things, including AstraZeneca. You mentioned these Nephilim bloodlines and the trafficking of children and organs and blood, etc. And Michelle spoke earlier about how they're asset stripping the people, not just using the judiciary, but Alex has mentioned that they're doing it now without even, our knowledge, just locking people up. And it all plays into this whole timeline of coronavirus, where they brought out this Coronavirus Acts 2020 here in the UK, very similar acts and statutes that are being rolled out in other parts of the world. But part of that legislation allows them to detain our children from the schools or from their homes even, if they have suspect to believe that they're infected with, it's not even COVID-19, right? The language uses coronavirus. And as we know, coronavirus is a family of 5 or 6 different viruses that are naturally occurring in the body as a result of your immune system. It's an indicative of you having an immune system. And so they've brought in this legislation that can take away your children, your property, your assets, on the basis of you being infected or potentially them suspecting you being infected. And I was in Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, and a lady approached me and explained that she had been given some information and she wanted to send it over because it was to do with the locality that she was living in. She said this information was very disturbing. And when she sent it in, oh my gosh, is it disturbing? Yes, it is. And I understand it has been making the rounds around the internet, but obviously it's not been there's not enough of it, not enough talk of it, not enough of it being coming out, because I think this is a absolute clanger. And I will explain how it ties into what you've just said, Dean, as well, after looking at it. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen with you so that you can see the information which has been one sec. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. This is a BitChute channel. I'm assuming it's a woman called Elastair, who's named herself Elastair. I was sent these 2 videos. These 2 videos are in relation to documents that had been dumped. And the letter that came with it was from a German professor who had ordered some USB sticks from Amazon. When he received the Amazon files, one of them with USB sticks was opened. It was in an opened package, and they were going to send it back immediately. But before they did, they thought they would check what was on the USB stick. Now, what they found on the USB stick, and I'm going to flip to another screen. Can you see this? It's a different.
Yes, the
Okay.
letter.
So this is a letter that came with it with 30 pages, and I'm just going to draw in closer to information on what we believe to be children with their date of birth, with their age, their blood type, the length of time that they've been in custody. Now, most of you, well, everyone here on this channel is going to know what adrenochrome is. So the quality of their adrenochrome, and then their due disposal date. Okay. And even here, I think this is saying, but whether they're going to determine that through suicide or not, the origin of their, from where they came. I mean, this is 30 odd pages. I'm just going to drill back out of this, of children, their adrenochrome, their disposal dates. Now, on top of that, towards the end of this, we now have even further detail of the type of production, the location that they're being held, because these are in camps. This is raw adrenochrome production, guys. I'm absolutely flabbergasted that this. It looks like there was a whistleblower. Obviously, this is data that is so explosive that they couldn't put their name to it. They've just put it onto a USB stick. And now what we also have are these labs. This is all coming from a company called the CYM Caring Corp. This company is registered in New York. It's tied, you can see it. Caring is youth, youth is money, money is freedom. And what this is reports going to several, I'm going to say over 30 different companies here in the UK, based in various different locations in Liverpool, in Manchester. And basically these letters are coming from New York. This is this year. You can see dated July, this particular one. Please find enclosed our confidential new detainee and production reports. And they're showing you the raw production of adrenochrome per detention center with the average age of the detainees. And then they're sending the list of the detainees that are used for that specific production and the quality. So you can see here, if they've got quality of A++ to A, they're going for a lot higher than if you were producing B negative or below. So this is the market value per milligram of raw adrenochrome production that is being progressed by this company, or I don't know whether it's either produced by this company or this company is wrapped up in it, and maybe Dean's come across them, I don't know, with his extensive research into companies. But you can see here that they are a corporation registered in New York. There, they've got their registration company, and literally they're sending to all these different companies a list of the adrenochrome that's being produced, the quality, the quantity, and the rate at which they would be selling it. So this is over 30 companies, friends. I mean, this is absolutely disgusting. Now, what I want to bring into this is, after receiving this, I looked into some of these companies. Now, I've only briefly had an overview into some of these companies. And what I came across was one particular person. So this is one of the companies, MediImmune Limited, that is listed on those documents. And when I went into this company, it was discovered that this guy, Ian Alistair Collins, is a director. Now, Ian Alistair Collins is also a director of AstraZeneca. What? So there we have it. We have a direct connection to a director of AstraZeneca, which is a Crown corporation, as we know, which Dean is pointing out, but he's also a director of MediImmune, who are receiving documents such as this, offering them adrenochrome. So now we have a direct link between AstraZeneca, the vaccine manufacturers, adrenochrome, and the sale and purchase of adrenochrome here in the UK.
May I come in on this?
Bombshell.
While we have Simone's screen share still on, if you could go back to the top, because I've had a couple of days to look at this as well. Now, the covering letter in German, I can vouch for the accuracy of the translation which is circulating, except it's not apparently a professor, but a lady called Steffi, short for Stephanie, who signs off at the bottom of the first page. Through the small typos she makes in her German letter, it looks like she is basically an average Jane Doe in Germany. It is interesting that she's writing to Dirk Schaefer at an unobscured home address in Berlin. There is a Dirk Schaefer who is a truth documentary maker, so the name fits, and I believe that is the same Mr. Schaefer who has a presence on Gab, the uncensored social media network, who is sticking up for this information which has apparently been sent to him and he's disseminated. So far so good, although it is odd for Germans to publish their home addresses. They're very privacy minded usually. So that's a slight question mark. The bit on screen at the moment, you can see the capital letter Q several times. There is a Q followership in Germany, and without wanting to offend other panelists or some of the viewers who may be given to it, I would say there is a cultish element to the Q stuff. So people may start pointing the finger at saying, oh, this lady's a Q follower. She's fallen into a trap, a honey trap of information. That is a possible accusation that could be made. Then the pages of what looks like dot matrix era printouts. Some US military outfits I've visited personally use this old-fashioned format. Look at the bases, by the way, which are involved. Mainly US Army bases and US Air Force bases. Guantanamo Bay is often mentioned. Some chemical manufacturers. I'm not chemically minded enough to know, but I can anticipate some objections in that there is mention of adrenochrome quality. It may be disinformation which is used to cover this up, but I can anticipate the objection that adrenochrome oxidates so quickly that it's unusable. It is itself an oxidated adrenaline, that you take the hormone adrenaline and oxidize it. There could also be the objection made that the idea that adrenochrome can only come from the glands of tortured children in order to give people their kicks or to prolong their lives. This seems to have come out of post-war sci-fi literature and dystopian literature. Anthony Burgess, A Clockwork Orange in the 50s, and then Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson in 71. These are the people who start injecting the meme. They're probably bad guys themselves, so they're twisting the information. They start injecting the meme into society that there is this market among the disgraceful super rich in getting children tortured to produce adrenochrome. Some people say, well, you can just manufacture adrenochrome in a chemical plant without the need for children, and it's unstable anyway. I don't go into details of that. I have too much respect for real chemists to say yay or nay on that. I was, even given the whistleblower documents that come our way, I was absolutely knocked for six by the upfrontness here of saying, yes, we're torturing these children. Yes, some of these children have suicide attempts and get suicided. I would not discount it for that reason. Don't get me wrong. But the dates all stack up. Look at the print date here, June 1st. Right. So, and the end of the end of this 30-page document is about a dozen pages of these letters, as Simone mentioned, to Northwest English pharmaceuticals, because there's a cluster there along both banks of the Mersey. So that's why you've got addresses in Cheshire, Liverpool, Manchester. There's several things that people can check out. The Duns there is the Dun and Bradstreet company registrations. Dean will have done a lot of work on companies based on their unique Duns identifiers. A second strand is that in Britain we have this SIC code, Standard Industrial Classification. And I note that there's 2 or 3 different codes used for the different Northwest of England pharmaceuticals who are addressed with an identical boilerplate message page by page. The Dear Sir letter is headed by a different SIC code depending on whether you're dealing with a research facility, a teaching facility, or an industrial pharmaceutical producer. I do not know whether it's conceivable that this company would even disclose its real US addresses, but down the bottom, the footer of this message has got 2 US addresses to check out. A Fifth Avenue swanky business address, 725 Fifth Avenue, so that's their Manhattan correspondence address, and below that, their deliveries address, which would stack up in some ways, is Annapolis on the eastern shore of Maryland, which is on the river. So it is a traditional pharmaceutical location together with Delaware just below there. So this Annapolis location, it should, in a legal, safe way, I think, be checked out by people who are very concerned about this information. You could also, if people are watching this and want to know how to take it on, look at the LinkedIn profiles and associates of the named individuals at these British pharmaceuticals who are allegedly in receipt of these letters with the price list. I've never seen anything really this shocking. Oh, and of course, Mr. Yorrington is named there as CEO and founder of the company, allegedly supplying the adrenaline from tortured children in various North American locations. One more thing that puzzled me, sorry to be so dry and analytical about such horrors, but if you go back, please, Simone, to the main body, the list, the 12-page printout, the names of the children, including those who have an origin of Costa Rica or Mexico, if you look across to the names on the left, it's Anglo names. So I am assuming that whether or not this is exactly what it purports to be, the argument being given in this document is that these children are being farmed or tortured or what have you in the country in question. So it looks like Anglo children obtained, captured, whatever, stolen in the United States or Canada, who've been sent down to Central America to be farmed. It's almost too wicked to talk about, but there will be objections from chemists about the feasibility of this. There will be objections about whether you would ever, as a producer, be brazen enough to put this detail in, but I've never seen anything like this that has 3 or 4 layers of depth of a company and personal identifiers that can be cross-referenced and correlated with each other. So I suggest that people get mind mapping this.
I might just add here, Simone, that the Collins, you mentioned this director who was AstraZeneca board and the board of this MedImmune, I think, is a Collins. And the Collins family, according to Fritz Springmeier, is one of the 13 Illuminati bloodline families. And
in fact, it's a Scottish-Irish one, which corresponds to the Ian Allister name there. I'm afraid Scots feature very heavily in this. I mean, just down the road from Annapolis, Maryland, where this pharmaceutical allegedly has its production facilities, is the DuPont dynasty, which controls Delaware in a very satanic way. And also the town I'm sitting in the Netherlands has a DuPont subsidiary, and they too, according to Springmeier and Robin de Ruiter, are one of the 13 top fiefdom families, yes.
Yeah, this guy, he's been appointed on all the boards on the 31st of May, 2017, all in one hit, all of these companies, 31st of May, 31st of May.
That's within 3 weeks of receiving allegedly this letter from CYM.
The 31st of May, 2017?
Sorry,
the letters
wrong year.
were...
Yes, that's 2020.
Yes. I just think it's incredible that this information has now come to light. And if anybody watching this wanted to find out more, Alastair, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. If you go to her channel on BitChute, she's done two parts on this, explaining what she believes it is. You know, these documents and the link to these documents are in her on her channels. I just cannot believe that this hasn't been exposed even further than what it was. And now, you know, I'm a layperson, just having a look at the directorship of some of these companies, and there's already connections to the vaccines and the coronavirus that we're all living through now, which, you know, as I say, if they want to take away our children, you know, is this all part of it? You know, it has to be. There's no other way you can, you know, you can't deny that there are connections here to children, adrenochrome, vaccines, and the ultimate goal of depopulation here.
A technique which we have discussed doing in many of these satanic cases where, establishment names are mentioned and their crimes are accused, is if you can simply get a camera, a smartphone or anything else in people's faces without doing anything unlawful, and simply if you happen to come across Ian Alistair Collins or anyone else, try to catch them unawares and say, hey, Ian Alistair Collins, is there any truth in what you're accused of? There are many, I won't name who, but in supposed cases, well, we know that they're real, but I have to say alleged cases of child theft, rape, murder involving high up people with direct license under the corporate crown. What we often say to people is if you ever catch one of these hobnobs, walking down the street, simply just get their body language. If you come up to them and say, have you done any of this? Because I can guarantee the answer will not be a straightforward no with neutral body language or natural horrified body language. That, I'm afraid, is the the evidence you really can go with in such a corrupt day is the court of public opinion. Shaming, naming and shaming. I mean, the Apostle Paul says it, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them, or according to other translations, bring them to light. You've already done more than half of the work of winning the battle by doing that.
Yes. I think people need to get a real understanding of, like Dean says, these bloodline families. The connection to the children and the underworld and the adrenochrome is huge. They not only have they been disenfranchising us and stealing our minerals and our oil and our resources and our time and our energy, our sweat equity and our innovation, but they're now coming after our children, and this is huge business for them.
I mean, it's so shocking. I mean, anyone that's watching this, and we must make sure that this goes viral, anyone with children or grandchildren, please wake up and stand up. This is not difficult. The Crown Corporation, they are very few. We, the people, now have to remove these evil criminals and take control of our countries and this world. And there are so many beautiful solutions. We have to stand together now, the 99.9% against these evil satanic psychopaths. It's
worth saying, I went to school and then university and then British intelligence, 3 stages of life with that 0.1%. So I can testify to what Dean said there. I mean, there may be people watching, patriotic Brits who feel maybe they're a little smarting by what he said, but he hasn't told a word of exaggeration there. You go to boarding school with these guys, usually the grandsons of the current generation of senior criminals. When they're teenagers, it's their granddads who are still running the show, and they boast, just like in ordinary school environments, you'd boast that your dad was cleverer or better than other people's dads. In those environments, it's my granddad's more corrupt than yours. He's a greater criminal. He's stolen more money. And among the boys themselves, the competition is, I'm thicker than you. No, I'm stupider than you. It really is an inversion of every morality. And then, Cambridge has got a lot of, bright, ordinary genius people involved. So have the boarding schools, to be honest. There's plenty of moral, upstanding men there, but they're not in the majority. The dominant culture is get along. That is, play along to get along, or worse. And these boarding schools try to get their graduating pupils into the best, that is, the most wicked and lucrative positions in the City of London, and the equivalent with the prep school system and Ivy League in the US. This week we found out that the Ivy League has got more trillions of government money than flowing into it than it does in its educational activities. So those massively endowed bodies, which again the corporate crown set up in New England centuries ago to be charities to educate the poor, just like our own boarding schools, what they've become is not just elite miseducation in many cases, but they're simply a boondoggle for especially pharmaceuticals, I'm afraid to say, for them to be drawn to this honeypot. Look at Lieber at Harvard, who's so well tied into the Wuhan outbreak. There's so many of these dirty deals going on around Cambridge, around Harvard. The real money is in getting political patronage to do the backroom laboratory work, especially in the medical sciences and the biosciences and the mind sciences. For the universities, there's trillions flowing around in those projects.
And they've become very dark projects currently, as we know, in the biosciences and the neurosciences. And they're all about, literally, it's weaponizing everything against the human body and the human brain. And there are infinite numbers of scientists trained in the best schools in the world who are very happy to engage in this kind of research, without a thought as to the real ethicality of what they are doing and what they are becoming a part of. This is absolutely shocking information, Simone, and, I commend you for bringing it forward. As you say, not many people are bringing it forward, and what you and Alex and Dean have done over here is you've looked very closely at the possibility that this information could be fake, right? Could be false data, could be just deliberately floated as disinfo in our midst. But the level of detail is astounding, isn't it? The names of all of those military bases involved, then the ages of the children, how long they've been in custody. I mean, who are these children? They're detained under what? These immigration laws when they try to cross borders? Are those the children? that could be here?
Well, I mean, when you know that they make money off of bonds and, your life, it's just another way for them to make money off of us and do their destruction, their death and destruction. The enemy is there to kill, steal, and destroy, you know. Yeah.
And if adrenochrome, which it seems to be, is indeed a real substance, a real chemical substance, and it's indeed obtained from the adrenaline of people, from hormones, from glands, from humans, then it's also plausible that somebody's actually doing this deliberately, right? Torturing children to get this drug out of their bodies and then to
We're
sell
dealing
it.
with people so dark that they look for a pretext, often a literary topic or literary device, to explain elegantly the jollies that they want to engage in anyway. I mean, that's what Burgess in A Clockwork Orange is saying. He invents two camps of hooligans, right? The teenage thugs who beat people up for fun, and the state researchers who are mad professors. And they're both looking for pretexts to torture people. And it's in that climate he injects the idea, yes, well, there's this adrenochrome, or drenchrome is what Burgess shortens it to, and it's great for a kick. So even if the idea that you can stably oxidate the adrenaline of a torture victim and store it as powdered or whatever adrenochrome, and that it will give people a pick-me-up, even if that's nonsense, I think that the underlying literary trope involved is we have an elegant justification as these ever so superior people to enjoy the suffering of the plebs below us. I mean, there's been a long, with the decline of proper religion and morality for over 100 years, a long time that the void in Britain and the other English-speaking countries in particular has been filled in. And it's often the fake religion that's come to the fore, a disguised form of Satanism, is scientism, technocracy, and it comes to the fore in sci-fi. Right? So look for the hints in sci-fi. Even authors that you might have grown up thinking were great and visionary people, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, in hindsight, in the cold light of day, if you look at their statements about children and the less well-educated and the rights which the great and the good have over the children and the less educated in the poor countries, it ain't pretty. Sci-fi itself is a kind of pseudo-religious justification for the torture, murder, and mayhem that goes on, the plunder of national wealth and family resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think this material that we've looked at this evening looks pretty authentic.
It's very shocking, isn't it? At the moment I saw it and I listened to that video, I was just so disturbed, literally. I posted it on Twitter, and to what you have said as well, Alex, there are many people online on Twitter who've posted little screenshots of tweets from various people in Hollywood who've made reference to something like adrenochrome and to a bad batch of adrenochrome, remember? And that being a kind of marker that the intel agencies can use to identify who they are, who are doing this, who are part of this racket that involves the torture and abuse of children. And also this whole thing with panda eyes, I think that's talked about in this video as well, because the children are so horribly tortured and sodomized that they get extremely black circles around their eyes, and they're called panda eyes.
Yes, when their whole internal bowel system is ruptured, basically, and it could even lead to death. It's just this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, Romola. This is why, this is what I woke up to, or this horrendous nightmare for these children. And it's not just an incident here and there. This is worldwide, and people need to wake up to this reality that it's not going to go away unless we do something about it. Because like Dean says, everything is tied back to the crown. Everything is tied back to these Nephilim bloodlines who have been worshipping Molech, who have been worshipping Satan, who drink the blood because the life is in the blood, the soul, the nefesh of a person is in the blood, and the very part that is supposed to go back to your maker is actually stolen. That's what it's about. The word says that the life is in the blood. The word life in Hebrew is nefesh, which means soul. So the soul of a person is in the blood, and when a Satanist drinks it, he's robbing that part from God. He's robbing it.
More widely, generally, Satan, as I always say in the bigger set piece talks I do, Satan thinks of himself as a vastly superior mind to any human mind. And the long and the short of it is he's very interested in our corporeality, our embodiedness, because he isn't created physical,
Yes.
nor are his angels. If he wants to have fun, or any demon under him wants to have fun, getting drunk or having sex, you need a body for those intoxicating pleasures, those sensual pleasures. So this is where inhabiting or possessing a body comes in. Ultimately, as we see very much Rudolf Steiner and others warning about, it's not just Christians, it's anyone who's meditated about this really for a long time. And again, sci-fi warns about it, is that we are going to have the brains and particularly the soul sucked out of us. Satan has no need for that. In fact, it's an obstacle to him, and we will simply be obedient shells. We're just there to do the bidding, and the mind will come from him. So, any way that of removing people's mind and ability to think is there. Even if the adrenochrome angle or the particular product claims and the chemical claims turn out not to stack up, that doesn't bother me at all. In terms of having said, watch out, this could be very serious wickedness being talked about here, because we've mentioned Fritz Springmeier and Robin de Ruyter with their 13 satanic bloodlines. One of the strands of their research that comes out is, since the sack of Baghdad again by the Khans, the Mongols, the Venetian bankers then take that over, and again it's not Jewish bankers largely, it's Gentiles who do this. They take over the old model of pushing opium, Indian-grown opium, on the Far East, on China. The very same, again, not Jewish, largely Scottish families that do that set up HSBC to do that, then move seamlessly into the crown models that in the 20th and 21st century that Dean has been talking about. So we're talking about, there's no doubt historically it's established that the underbelly, the corporate underbelly of the crown, its leading families, have a long history of happily pushing soul-destroying material on very large numbers of people in what they regard as lesser nations and underclasses. So it's not an obstacle to credibility of this new claim. Would they do that? Well, they have done it for 1,000 years. It's simply a question of whether these particular details stack up.
Exactly. And going back to the courts, with this adrenochrome and these factories, is this where some of our children are going to, where they're being unlawfully taken through this court system? Is this where our children could be ending up?
Very apropos question, because that's what the family courts are doing, and they're doing it everywhere. They're doing it in the UK, they're doing it in Canada, in the USA, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Europe as well, I think.
Yes.
The family courts are actually taking children away from good families and giving them away, often disappearing them, as we found out, Michelle, speaking to Maria, right, in our first panel.
Yes.
She doesn't even have contact with her children, and the social work mechanism refuses to give her any information as to where the children are, which is outrageous. After 5 years, her children have been taken away, and she's given no information. So it's like, where do the children go? So there is the possibility, it is plausible that the children are being used for very nefarious purposes. Also remember the incredible testimonial from Ronald Barnard, the banker. I think he's Dutch, right? And
Yes.
And he was talking about how there's 8,500 people right at the top of this pyramid, and they engage in the most dark practices. He talked about child sacrifice. That's sort of an insider testimonial. That's kind of major. So clearly this goes on. It's not conspiratorial or conspiracy theory to be talking about it, mentioning it, speculating about it. Information has come down to us from various witnesses as well, in addition to these documents, Simone, which, as we know, we don't know to the extent to which these documents are true. But there's a lot of supporting evidence that child sacrifice has been going on for a long time. The sacrifice of babies, the abuse of babies, for that matter, even circumcision, which I was reading an article about this morning or yesterday. Babies sometimes cry till their lungs burst when they're circumcised. And they have priests sucking the blood off, the part that's taken away, whatever. It's outrageous to me. It's like genital mutilation from Africa. It's the girl children. These are horrific practices, and you have to ask, where do they come from? And Dean, I think you were talking about how these practices do not come from anything human, right?
No, that's the thing. They're not, and that's why it's so. I think that's why it's so hard for the average person maybe to understand that this goes on, to acknowledge that this goes on, because they're human, and we humans, we don't want to think that could even go on because it's not human.
Yeah.
But once you understand that these things are not human, that they're, again, ultimately they're parasites. So they're here to parasite everything. So they've done that. They've mined everything. They've cut all the trees down. They've polluted all the air. They've, in the physical world, they've pretty much destroyed everything, and taken everything, put it in the bank. And now it really is about the human individual body and our organs and our adrenochromine, and then get into here the human bonds. This issuing of human capital bonds. Captain Austin Fitts said we're moving from a petroleum standard to a human standard, and that's what we mean. That's what we mean by that. And Alison McDowell's done some really good work on this too. But the next frontier for the parasites is what they call the fourth industrial revolution. Forced us into agriculture in Samaria, forced us into the steam industrial revolution in Europe, enslaved all the people there, took the men out of the home to work in their factories. Then they took the women out of the home in America under the oil revolution. Now they needed the women out of the home, so they hid it behind women's liberation when they did that, and they made it sound like a good thing. So now everybody's working for the man 40, 80 hours a week. Their families are destroyed, their kids home playing a Nintendo, and the vulnerability grows for the individual human. Now the individual human is losing his extended family and then his nuclear family, and then all of a sudden, so they got us right where they want us that way, because now they're going to start trading in our stuff. And that's what the whole synthetic biology is. And that's what the whole fourth industrial revolution is. It's going beyond the physical material resource of the planet. And the resource now is the human being. And they will dissect and atomize, and every little part of us they can capitalize on, that they can trade on. They'll do that. So this is where the opportunity zones come in. And this is where they want to put people on pathways, and outcome-based results, and they want to modify your behavior through coercion, and it's all it's like a new frontier. But if you think about it, it's the ultimate in what a parasite. Once a parasite's done eating the rest of the earth, what's the parasite going to do? It's going to target the individual human being. And and speaking of parasites, one of the biggest parasites in the world is the Red Cross, which, again, the Red Cross, meaning the cross between the bloodline cross between Nephilim and humans. That's what Red Cross symbolizes. By the way, Zionism etymologically is Scion, S-C-I-O-N. It means to graft. So the whole Zionist movement has nothing to do with Jews. It has everything to do with, again, the grafting of the Nephilim blood into the human population so they can control us. So Zionism is a Nephilim project. Just so happens Israel sits in the middle of the biggest landmass on earth, running from Copenhagen to Singapore, running from Vladivostok to Windhoek, Namibia, and right in the middle is Israel. So it's a very strategic geographical place. And that's why they made Israel the Jewish homeland. Has nothing to do with Jews, has everything to do with controlling the planet from Tel Aviv and from the middle of the continent. So this is all just moving to this next phase now, and they want to move the capital to Tel Aviv. They want to have the third temple. They want to have probably Prince William, who has an elongated skull. He's Habsburg, Merovingian, and Bourbon on his daddy's side. His daddy is King Juan Carlos of Spain, not Prince Charles. And then on his mama's side, he's got the Spencers, the Sinclairs, the Collins, and also the Merovingians. And so it's a powerful Nephilim bloodline through William that we're looking at. And they want him to be probably the Antichrist, but also they'll march him out as the return of Christ. And then they'll say, well, the Merovingians, that bloodline, that's we're related to Jesus. Didn't you read Dan Brown's books? You know, he was our chief propagandist for like 20 years, or watch his movies, and then they're going to do it like that. But the whole thing has to do with bloodline. So the Red Cross goes around and they basically they go into war zones, they clean up the mess, they get intelligence for the GCHQ and the NSA, the Five Eyes Alliance, and then they also get blood donated to them, and then they sell it to hospital chains. They sell it for a lot. My wife needed blood one time, and it was like $600 a pint. You know, so this is, I mean, there's some straight up vampirism right there, just direct, straight up, sucking people's blood, giving them nothing for it. Also finding out what kind of blood they have in the process, which is part of the big data game right now. And then just selling it to, you know, so, and then of course the Rothschilds, you can look at as the red shield. So they're the bloodline shield. So some people might get as far as seeing, you know, the corporate control. Some people might see the banker control, the central bank control. Some people might get as far as, Israel's role. And then they'll stop there and become anti-Semitic or something crazy. Some people get to the Rothschilds, $100 trillion. But then right there, you have the red shield, the Rothschilds. And they're designed, by design, they take the heat for the rest of the Crown Corporation, for the rest of the Nephilim bloodlines. The Rothschilds take the heat. That's why they're the red shield. So it's all very sophisticated, and the people way back in the shadows who drink most of this adrenochromine are the black nobility and the crown and the families. And
the higher you go up, the less Jewish and the less sort of Germanic it gets. The very top, as you absolutely rightly say, are Italian patrician families, a couple of French, like the Payzers, who've been very big in America in the past. They're not originally French. It's from a group of countries around this part where I'm sitting, of West Central continental Europe, where the Frankish tribe dominated, from Benelux down to northern Italy. Switzerland being right in the middle of that's their home operating base, really. And you know, the original licensed outliers are the English, the Scots, the Spaniards, who were just outside that core of the Holy Roman Empire, the parts of Europe that survived most of the European wars and stayed out of some of them. These were given license to operate. I mean, King Juan Carlos of Spain in 75 was given back by the papacy here operating as Roman patricians, not as a church, was given back the mythical crown of Aragon, which had been in the control of the crown of England for several hundred years from the Reformation and the era of piracy onwards. So crown here has stopped being anything political. It's a license to plunder. And in this case, it's been subcontracted. You know, so nations really don't have any.
Oh dear.
On a good flow then.
I know.
Brilliant. Yeah, we know why you got cut off, because that's important information.
I think you can still hear me. It's just at the webcam.
We can hear you. Yes, I just want to share screen and show a couple shields as you're speaking. So go right ahead. Keep talking.
I was done with that. So why doesn't Dean pick that up, because he can talk more about this as well.
Okay, this is the shield of the Windsor, House of Windsor, right, Dean? And you had mentioned the harp, so I just was looking for it, and I see it. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other one I wanted to show very briefly was the Rothschild coat of arms, right? Which is the same thing, it looks like. Oh, very close.
The official explanation of this is that the two quarters are the same, which is the three lions lying down, is England. Top right is the lion rampant, which is Scotland. And as David Scott, my Scottish colleague, would be very quick to point out, is also the Lion of Judah. And also where I'm sitting right here in Holland and down the road in Flanders, they also have the lion rampant on the yellow background. They all share that. It comes from the Crusader era.
And
bottom left there is supposed to be the Harp of Ireland.
You know why.
Sorry. Go on.
Go ahead, Dean.
I was just going to say, now you know why unicorns are becoming fashionable and popular, and every toy is a unicorn.
Oh yes,
They're coming out.
The mythology is that the lion is England, which is, you know, the countries that have lions in the royal symbol. These are not national symbols, right? These are crown bloodline symbols. They don't belong to the people. Arguably they do, but originally it belongs to the family that holds the crown. The lion has been used by England, Holland, and Flanders, and indicates strength, and comes from this Lion of Judah idea, although it's been subverted. The unicorn is a mythical beast, and it's always been what the Crown of Scotland has claimed as its symbol. And there's this famous Irish nationalist ballad about the lion and the unicorn were fighting for the crown. Well, the Act of Union, which was to the benefit of the English and Scots people, basically allowed the United Kingdom, the newly created state, to be the world dominating force and to even hold off the continental superpowers like France. But it also allowed the creation of, sorry to say I'm sitting in the Netherlands here, but of this Dutch banking model, of the impersonal limited liability corporation, the shareholders being central rather than turning a profit for individuals and for the community. So the Crown model, and particularly the idea that it can have a massive underbelly of fellow travellers, licensed plunderers, that comes from that era of the union of the crowns of Scotland and England. And the Irish would be quick to say they were some of the first victims, but of course, like the Scots, they also profited greatly, or some of their favoured sons did. So that Harp of Ireland there is meant to be the symbol of Ireland. But the interesting thing is the real Irish constitutionalists and nationalists will say that there is not a long history of particularly that depiction of the woman and the harp going back in Irish history. Likewise, the cross of St. Patrick was not an authentic symbol the Irish used for their own nationality. At best, it's a symbol of the crown in its right of Ireland, not of the Irish nation.
Yes, and all that flowery decoration that you see there, all that flare up is very typical of Phoenician buildings and structures, which you'll see throughout history and the continent. Really, you'll see any building, most of our buildings, you'll have the big long columns, and then you'll have these flowery tops which are very symbolic of Phoenicians and that power structure that came in, and it's never really gone away. So.
That's really interesting. That sort of Baroque flourish over there, the scrolling, stylized patterns of flowers and leaves. Wow. So it's all ancient. It's based on Phoenician power.
Thing. I was going to say one interesting thing. There's 33 vertebrae. There's 33 vertebrae in the human, spine or back. So 33 degrees of Freemasonry, right? And the 33rd degree level is the top level. Then you become illuminated, and at the Atlas vertebrae, after that you become illuminated, so you become the head. So then what sits on the head? Well, the crown. Because the crown doesn't have to do anything. The Illuminati at least have to plan and try to depopulate people and have meetings, but the crown just sits on their yacht all day, or drinks adrenochromine, or goes to a strip bar, or golfs or whatever. They don't do anything. And that again, there's the parasite sitting on top of humanity, called the crown, which we got to get rid of. We got to get rid of this crown.
Yes.
I agree with you, Dean. I mean, the thing is, when you look at our beautiful world, we the people, we built this infrastructure. This is our infrastructure, not theirs. The banking system, the money, the properties, the land, this is ours. This is not theirs. And if they think that we are going to sit back and allow them to do this, they better think again.
And right now, Michelle, sort of to bring it to the moment, look at what's happening in Liverpool. They've got the army out. They're trying to get all the children force tested in schools in Liverpool. And there's still talk in the US of Operation Warp Speed, right, Dean? About using the military here as well in the US. And you had Fauci speaking yesterday about how Americans have such an independent spirit, but they've got to sit back and shut up and learn how to be squashed and take orders in this particular case, because you see it's such a dire emergency. We're all going to die from this tiny little virus that nobody's isolated and nobody can see. But we've got to run a huge psyop on everybody, and we've got to get Americans to subjugate themselves and listen to us. So this push is happening at the COVID level and bringing in the army, threats of mandates, what's happening in New Zealand as well, and in Australia. They've shut the country down. People can't leave Australia apparently until 2024.
Australia, Canada. Yeah, right.
Canada.
There's troops in the streets, just parading around cities with their heads out the tank. You think it would be like in Beirut, you know, and they're conditioning people. They're getting people ready for when warp speed kicks in or their plan up there kicks in, and they just bring the army out and occupy streets and forcibly vaccinate people. But you know, we're just going to have to fight. Now, I'm a pretty peaceful person, but you know, when that gets to the point where they're in our face, then we're not going to have any choice. So
Yes.
I got feeling it's going to come down to a scrap here. You know, I really do.
You know, there's
It's up to
something that,
them.
yeah, there's totally, but there's also something that we've lost our identity. We've lost our right, you know, our knowledge of who we are and our rights, and that, you know, we created government. Government didn't create us. Therefore, you know, we hold government to account. But there's one thing that a doctrine that we should all be very aware of, and that is defend your castle. Right, stand your ground doctrine. In English constitutional law, you have the right to use deadly force if you are coming under attack and you believe that you are going to be harmed or injured. It's called defend your castle or stand your ground, and they are case law. So people need to just remember that no state, no government, no policy enforcer, no council official, no army troop can ever enforce upon you something that you do not want to do without your informed consent and without contract. So yeah, I think people need to be reminded of that. I know Alex is a you know, he's understands the Constitution and is very much a part of re-educating people. But that is a big piece of what we're going through right now, is a re-education. Many people need to re-educate themselves to the Human Rights Act 1998, the Declaration of Human Rights 1938, I think it was 48, the Bill of Rights 1689, and our Magna Carta 1215. These are all important, and they're all in place for a reason.
Absolutely right, Simone. And David Scott and Brian Gerrish and I have been talking about this a while, and Mike Robinson also, who's the co-editor on UK Column. And so David and Mike and I have formed a trio to start podcasting. We're calling our series A Dissident's Guide to the Constitution. And it's of interest to people in all the jurisdictions in the British Isles directly. Almost 100% interesting to United States and Commonwealth listeners, and substantially interesting to people even in a completely civil law Napoleonic jurisdiction, because of the underlying principles we're discussing. They find expression in different ways. So God willing, we'll be going at this at the rate of one every couple of weeks for over a year. We're starting off with the main core concepts. What's a constitution? What's common law? What are rights? That one is coming out in a day or so. What's democracy? What's natural law? What's a nation state? What's the rule of law? Then we'll start going through history, and at that point the listeners with no background will be able to follow us on our whistle-stop tour of a millennium. We're focusing then on what's been hidden, but ultimately we have a growing awareness of people saying I stand on common law. But what would be so disastrous is if people were a little informed but largely misinformed and thought that they could pick and choose which laws to accept and which statutes to honour. And even worse, if people thought that this little knowledge gave them an opportunity to start thieving from others in any way, you know, and not just physical theft, but the theft of reputations. You know, it's you need to be an adult of good conscience operating in fairness to understand the liberty that the common law allows everyone, and which it accepts is inherent to everyone. You can't just wake up one morning and say, get away from me, common law, common law. You have to understand the underlying spirit of, I won't be the one to initiate violence. If you have a dispute with me, let us settle it. Have we reached an agreement, otherwise known as a contract? Well, if not, then we better start from scratch. Those are the principles on which the common law operates, and it's also a minimum standard to which we hold each other in communities. Small, self-sufficient communities, whether you're in a city or country area, are the only way to face the current tyranny. Most of the talks I give are increasingly focusing on this. We're not all like outlying parts of the United States that can be self-sufficient. If we're in an urban context, especially in most parts of Europe, we are going to be facing troops and people who don't think our way, who are going to be in the same geographical space. There are ways of forming communities even in that situation, and we're going to try to educate people on that. The basis is know who's in your community and who's on your side, and what agreements you have made with them on the minimum standard of lawful conduct. I would recommend Joel Skousen on this with his World Affairs Brief. That's worldaffairsbrief.com. And many other resources I could mention. I forgot to mention the book in question by Daniel Estelin that I referred to earlier. It's called the.
You went on mute.
You went on mute just now, Alex. We didn't hear the name of the book.
The book is called The Tavistock Institute. Sorry for the unmute failing. That's Daniel Estelin's book, which describes in the first chapter what I mentioned earlier, allegedly about Putin, and talks about how mind control is done. And also I would mention, while we're on books, all of what was just being outlined by Dean about the 4 industrial revolutions, and how the bloodlines have seen that man's genius has reached a new stage, and they harness it so that they take well-meaning inventors and say, okay, this means we can enslave mankind a step further. That is all outlined in the preface to a 1,000-page book, a very weighty tome that people may have heard of, by Carroll Quigley. Carroll is a man's name. It's Carroll Quigley, who was the professor of history at Georgetown, an elite training ground in Washington. And this is where Bill Clinton went. Quigley was Bill Clinton's personal history tutor. And I've spoken to some of Quigley's students individually as well, who gave me more than is in the book. Quigley set out in the preface to his book, Tragedy and Hope, that the bloodlines are, in some areas in history, playing catch-up. Man invents more portable weapons or better ways of making a living with less back-breaking effort. The bloodlines respond by saying we're going to have to get them back onto the reservation. And at every point that man says, we don't need you anymore, bye-bye, we declare independence, sometimes very literally like in 1776, and at other times in other more subtle ways, communitarian ways, the bloodlines respond by saying, well, we're going to have to level the scores and get our monopoly of violence over you back and our monopoly of narrative so that you only think our approved thoughts. Quigley's quite explicit about that's moved through the levels of working the land, working money, working machinery, and now working the mind. So now we are the human resources. The new term for personnel or employees is human resources. We're there to be abused. So this is many cycles that we've gone through of people who shouldn't be the crown controlling us. I mean, if we don't have government, whether it's a crown or a republic, we have anarchy, and that's even worse than tyranny, because even your neighbor could kill you in anarchy, not just the few guys at the center with the guns. Anarchy is absolutely to be avoided. The third alternative beyond anarchy and tyranny is liberty under law, liberty under common law. That needs a standard of awareness and schooling, really. Tony Benn, a famous Labour member of Parliament who died not many years ago, brought out much of this and said, look, the Crown is supposed to be an individual sovereign acting on her oath with responsibility to the people. The big deceit that has been pulled is that the Crown at law is no longer a sole corporation. Very reluctantly, after many years, it did admit that it is in fact a corporate, a joint corporation. You know, that the corporate crown that Dean's been talking about the whole of this time ought not to exist. It's not necessary for a crown to have a corporate side in order to govern us lawfully. It is necessary if you wish to say, in the name of the people, I give you the ability to thieve and kill, which is what's happened. You know, so corporate crowns or corporations living off the republic, in the case of the United States and other republics, is unlawful. That's the heat of the battle that we're in at the moment.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It's
All
that crown
unlawful
corporation.
Yeah, and it's all unlawful because they declare themselves to be sovereigns. And the fact of the matter, we all come into this world sovereigns. And that's the biggest lie maybe of all, is that somehow these crowns can be without a state, above the law. Nobody can tell us anything. Nobody can grant us rights even. Who the hell are you to grant me rights under some 1532 treaty? I don't need to be granted any rights by some lizard. I'm a human being. I came into this world sovereign. I came into this world perfect, and I don't need any counsel or any, I don't need guidance. I don't need any guidance from the CDC today. Thanks very much. I don't need to be granted rights. I don't need a constitution even, because I'm operating under natural law. Natural law. And natural law is even more powerful than common law. And that's where you get help from the creator.
Yes.
Now, all this paperwork and all these contracts and all this courts, it's all controlled. It's all the lizard brain manifest. So now they have manifest their sickness, their psychosis into like legalese. How do you think they stole the Indians' land in America? They had very sophisticated language and tricky words that, of course, a Lakota speaker wouldn't understand, and they just stole their land. And because they haven't signed these things, never sign anything, never become a contract. If you want, make them do the signing. Like, you know, if somebody's doing you harm, like go find out what the name of the company is that put up that cell tower down the street from you, and it's probably Crown Castle, and then write them a contract and say, you know, okay, you can have your tower 1 block from my house, that's fine, but should I in any event get sick from the radiation coming off of this tower, you'll be liable for $20 million in medical damages. Please sign here. You know, that's the kind of thing we need to start doing. And if you want to lock me down with the mask,
Absolutely.
I'll wear your mask, but I'm going to charge you $1 million if I get sick from wearing that mask. And you name the name and you put their middle initial and you hold the official responsible. And not just Crown Castle, but the CEO of Crown Castle should be who you're naming there, an individual. Because corporations are just a fiction. Again, fabrication of a psychotic lizard brain. The Crown created corporations. It created the idea of corporations. The East India Company was the first. And it's all it is a way to shield an individual from liability. So what we have to do is remove the corporation, remove the legalese, remove the temple bar, the legal apparatus. You know, in America, like a lawyer has to be accredited by the Bar Association. That means British accredited legal. What the hell? Accredited by Britain? I'm an American. I mean, so it's all just, the whole superstructure just has to be exposed as corrupt. And then we operate under natural law. We operate under the idea. And I think that's how we take this thing down. And we started, and if there's going to be contracts for harm, for liability, then we issue those contracts and don't sign anything. The time for signing anything is over. Nothing.
That's brilliant. I think that's probably what we need to focus our next panel on, Dean, because this whole notion of notice of liability and holding the individuals responsible is huge. And you know, at the end of our last panel, I recall, Michelle, I guess you were the only one who was there, right? We talked about common law, and we talked about declaring ourselves alive under common law, and how once you declare yourself alive, because this breaks you away from, you know, their straw man, their legal fiction, etc., their all caps name, they've tried to incorporatize you as a corporation through that means. So once you sort of walk away from that, you know, and you sort of publicly disown that. Yeah, they give you a title. See, once you publicly disown that and you say, look, I'm a living person, a living being, their laws do not apply to you. None of their laws, which are statutory codes, right? They're statutes of their corporations. So they do not apply to you. So you walk away from that jurisdiction and, you know, you create your own jurisdiction, which is under God's law, natural law, you know.
That's why you never accept Mr. or Mrs. or any title, because just like they make up titles to land, which really isn't land, you're just getting the house. The Crown still owns the land, by the way. They're giving you a title of Mr. or Mrs. or something else, and it's this indication that you're their property. They've titled you.
Miner's account. It's your miner's account, isn't it?
Title or accept
a useful nugget
here.
Here.
You don't have a title.
A useful nugget is that the word jurisdiction through most of history since the Roman Empire, when the word comes about in Latin, jurisdictio, which means who speaks the law, who sets the law, for the first 1700 years of that term or so. It only ever means personal jurisdiction. Think of the episode in the New Testament in the Gospels when Herod and Pilate are arguing over who has personal jurisdiction to hear the case against Jesus Christ, right? Why is that? It's because jurisdiction was bound to individuals, and the secret in the bloodlines is it still is. They have allowed, with the creation of modern nation states, the fiction to take hold in codified law and constitutions that the country has got geographical jurisdiction. That is not, however, how the bloodlines operate. They say this bunch of souls is under your jurisdiction, even if they move around the face of the earth or off the earth. So we're dealing with people who think they have personal jurisdiction over our blood, our body, and our soul.
And the great thing is to say no. The important thing is to say no, you know, and it could be very simple. It could come down to just standing up in your own power and saying no, and, you know, acknowledging and recognizing for yourself that you are a sovereign, as Dean said. You know, we are born free, we are born sovereign. We need to reclaim and lay hold of our power and our freedom and start speaking that, you know, in power to these people who are standing in front of podiums and issuing idiotic guidances and edicts and expecting all of us to follow. And, you know, the business owners who are falling in with that and making the rest of us follow. They need to be educated the most, Alex, you know, on common law and rights, human rights, basic human rights, as you said, Simone, earlier. And in fact, that would be a great subject for panel 2. Just what are our human rights? We already have tons of treaties, conventions, declarations on the books, even in the statutes, you know, we acknowledging our human rights. And yet, not even lip service is being paid to these human rights anymore currently.
That's because we've lost it as well. I think, you know, when they took it out the schools, so the kids no longer know what their human rights are, when they no longer teach the police in the service what laws they're upholding. Instead, they tell them that it's the legislation that they're to uphold. You know, they compound that over, you know, 3 or 4 decades, and you've got people who no longer know what their rights are. Is this easier for the state to take it away, or for anyone to take it away?
So it's a case of going back to who we are and learning and relearning what we've lost, I think. You know, this has been an absolutely fascinating panel. It's been extremely informative, educative, and also deep diving, because we've delved into these really dark subjects. And thank you, Simone, for bringing up those documents so that we could have an open discussion about them. And, you know, leave it to the world to figure out what to do and where to go. We'll post all the links below, and we encourage and welcome other people to jump in here and start researching as well, right? On these documents, find out what's really going on so we can all inform ourselves and we can move forward. Any last words before we close for today?
I would very much encourage people to look for a social media video share simply entitled Common Law Strikes Again, of just over 2 minutes. You'll know it's the right clip if you find that the thumbnail and the opening sequence is of just the legs and feet of a policewoman filmed from behind a locked door. And it's a gentleman in a shop in, I think, Liverpool, who keeps the door locked while using the intercom to say to the female police officer, not a constable, but a newfangled officer who attends, no, you are not enforcing law, you're enforcing regulations. The whole calm demeanor, the spirit that he exudes in that episode is the how-to. It's the thing you need to emulate. It comes calmly out of him that he understands what law is, what the law is, what laws are, how these 3 concepts differ, and who is using what authority to do things to people. If you combine that with the podcast series we've just started, A Dissident's Guide to the Constitution, which can be listened to on ukcolumn.org or on various podcasting platforms, such as soundcloud.com/ukcolumn, then you will be set in good stead. Don't go out tomorrow morning and say, I claim common law, you have no power over me. This isn't a fantasy film. You know, start by understanding what the law is and who you are, and understanding that, you know, you have been created with certain requirements and standards. Understand what they are and operate within your own comfortable zone, as it were. Don't step outside that. Don't let a forced voice or a strident tone come out of you, but be like the shop owner in Liverpool.
Yes, that's what we need. What we need exactly that, Alex. What we need where we are now is the simple methods on to protect ourselves as the people and to remove the Crown Corporation. I do not believe this is rocket science where we are. The people are rising. These panels, I think we continue, you know, all the great guests that have been on the panel this evening, we'd love you to return. And I think these type of panels will empower the people so we can make drastic changes very quickly, which we need to do where we are now. And, you know, I think it's very simple. You know, we show people that the data has been manipulated. There is no law in these lockdowns. These vaccines are full of harmful poisons, which are just going to alter the DNA of humanity. 5G will depopulate humanity. Once we start putting all these things together and then using very simple law to stop this and enforce and actually remove the criminals and have them put in prison. And then we can start recreating a fair, beautiful new world.
Brilliantly put. Thank you, Michelle.
Hey.
Yeah. So a big thank you. And Dean, please don't disappear. You're needed more than ever now. We need you on board. I know you was out of action for a while, but your amazing inputs needed. And Alex and Simone and Romola, what a great panel. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Dean. Simone, any last words?
Not really. I mean, if anyone is looking for to take some direct action, go to our website, event202.org. We are currently teaching you how to withdraw from paying council tax. We don't believe that you should be funding these crimes against humanity, aiding and abetting treason and everything else. So we have provide you step-by-step guidance on how to do that if you wanted to do that as an action. And there's loads of other ways to get involved on the website. So yeah, please do go and check that out if you want to take some direct action.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Simone. It's fabulous that there's some actual, hands on the ground kind of, feet on the ground kind of activism going on, and advice that you can give people and people can go to and take in order to move forward. So on that note, thank you all so much for your contributions. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon or evening, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.